The restless sleeper woke up gasping again, 3:30 a.m., chest tight, ribs caving in like an old cage, drowning in air that wouldn't satisfy. Another night of violent dreams, falling, failing, fighting battles that didn't exist. His phone glowed on the nightstand like a tiny judge, already listing tomorrow's verdicts before the sun even rose. He'd forgotten what silence felt like, what stillness tasted like. Every night was a siege, every morning was a surrender to panic. But deep in an Oregon forest, there lived a man who hadn't dreamed in decades. Not because he'd lost his mind, but because he'd found something rarer, complete rest. The ancient sage moved through life not with force, but with flow. Effortless, unthreatened, impossible to wound. While the world choked on anxiety and drowned in overthinking, he breathed from his heels and woke without keeping score. This is his teaching. This is the way of the true man. And it starts with one simple, dangerous question. What if you've been breathing wrong your entire life? Before we dive into this story, check right now if you're already subscribed to the channel. We're building something special here. And write in the comments where you're watching this video from. Now let me tell you how this all began. The seeker had spent years climbing mountains that weren't his to climb. Every morning felt like stepping onto a minefield. Emails stacking up, expectations pressing down on his shoulders until breathing became a chore. He'd wake up paralyzed, his mind racing through scenarios that hadn't happened yet, losses he hadn't suffered, failures that existed only in his head. Sound familiar? Then one autumn morning, while hiking through the Oregon wilderness, trying to outrun his thoughts, he saw someone who moved differently. The ancient sage walked through the forest like a shadow passing over grass. No weight, no disturbance. He didn't stomp to prove his presence or rush to prove his worth. He simply was. The seeker noticed something unsettling. This man left no heavy footprints in the mud, not because he was light, but because he didn't fight the ground beneath him. "You walk like you're under attack," the old man said without turning around. The seeker froze. How did he know? The ancient sage paused by a stream, watching leaves drift past. You try to be great, so you suffer. You fear being small, so you exhaust yourself. Nature doesn't do this. He picked up a stone and let it go. It sank without struggling. The stone doesn't mind the depths. The cloud doesn't cling to the sky. Why do you cling to what you're not? The words hit deeper than logic. The seeker realized he'd been wearing a mask so heavy it had fused to his face. Success, control, certainty, all things he thought defined him, but were actually suffocating him. The ancient sage turned, his eyes holding that rare stillness you see in deep forests. "Walk with me tomorrow at dawn. I'll show you what it means to move through life without leaving scars on yourself." Something in those words felt like a window opening in a room that had been sealed for years. That night, the restless sleeper did what he'd done for years. He collapsed into bed, exhausted but wired. But this time, the struggle wasn't physical. It was the noise. His mind fired up. Tomorrow's presentation, last week's mistake, next month's bills. The silence of the room felt loud. He didn't gasp this time. He just stared at the ceiling, paralyzed by the static in his own head. Sleep wasn't rest. It was just a pause button that didn't quite work, where his anxious mind wrestled invisible opponents until sunrise. But the ancient sage had mentioned something strange the day before. The true man sleeps without dreams. It sounded impossible. Wasn't dreaming a sign of a creative mind? Weren't ambitions born in dreams? The seeker couldn't shake the question. So at dawn, eyes gritty and tired, he found the old man sitting by the river, breathing so quietly you'd think he had merged with the stone he sat upon. "You didn't sleep, did you?" the sage asked, though it wasn't really a question. "I can't stop the machine," the seeker admitted, voice cracking slightly. "Even when I sleep, I'm still calculating." The ancient sage nodded slowly. "That's because you carry the world to bed with you. Your mind never signals the day is done, so your spirit never uncoils. Dreams are just echoes of the tension you hold in your body." He gestured to the river. "Look, the water doesn't hallucinate about where it's been or where it's going. It simply flows. The sage closed his eyes, and the seeker watched something extraordinary happen. The old man's face softened, his posture unlocked, and within moments, his breathing deepened into something rhythmic and whole. It wasn't sleep, it was surrender. When he opened his eyes again, 15 minutes later, he looked more recharged than the seeker had felt in a decade. When the mind is still, the night is silent. You rest in the emptiness, not in escape. The seeker felt a heaviness in his stomach. What would it feel like to stop running even in sleep? The next morning, the anxious mind woke at 5 a.m., not with a gasp, but with a mental checklist. Before his eyes fully opened, his brain was already opening the ledger. Did I miss something yesterday? What's waiting for me today? What if I fail? His stomach churned. This was his normal. Waking up felt like being shoved onto a stage without knowing your lines. He grabbed his phone immediately, scrolling through notifications like a man searching for permission to exist. But then he remembered the ancient sage's invitation. Reluctantly, he dragged himself to the clearing. The old man was already there, sitting cross-legged on the damp grass, eyes open, face serene. He wasn't meditating or chanting, he was just there, present. The seeker noticed something that made him envious. The sage's face held no tension, no history, no shadow of what if. "You're keeping score, aren't you?" the ancient sage said, glancing over. "You woke up already tallying wins and losses for a day that hasn't even started." The seeker felt exposed. "How do you not do that? How do you wake up and not immediately plan?" The old man smiled faintly. "I greet the dawn without a scorecard. I step into the day with an open hand, not a clenched fist. Anxiety lives in the future, a place that doesn't exist yet. I live here." He tapped the ground. It sounded so simple, but the seeker's mind rebelled. But what about responsibilities, consequences? The ancient sage stood slowly, brushing off his robe. Consequences come whether you worry or not. Worry doesn't prevent them, it just ruins today while you wait for tomorrow. The true man wakes like a mirror, clear, empty, ready to reflect whatever comes without distortion. He turned toward the forest path. "Come, I want to show you how you've been breathing all wrong your entire life." The restless sleeper followed the ancient sage deeper into the woods, his breath already shallow and quick, like a rabbit sensing a predator. The old man suddenly stopped and turned. "Breathe for me right now." The seeker inhaled sharply through his nose, chest rising, shoulders lifting toward his ears. The sage shook his head. "You breathe from your upper chest, from your panic. Every breath is a gasp, a negotiation with the air. You're always on the edge of flight, even when you're standing still." The ancient sage knelt down and placed his hand flat on the earth. The multitude breathes from their throats. The true man breathes from his heels. He looked up. "People like you breathe high and fast, reactive, disconnected from the ground. Your breath never reaches your roots, so you are easily blown over." The seeker felt his face flush. It was true. He couldn't remember the last time he'd taken a full breath, without feeling like he was stealing time. "Lie down," the sage instructed. The seeker lowered himself onto the cool forest floor. "Now breathe as if the air is entering through the soles of your feet, traveling up through your legs, filling your belly, your chest, and finally reaching your head. Reverse the flow you've been using your whole life." It felt absurd at first, but the seeker tried. He visualized the air drawn up from the soil. The first real breath felt like waking up from a long illness. His ribs expanded sideways, his belly softened. For a split second, the mental chatter paused. The ancient sage watched with quiet approval. When you breathe from your heels, you anchor yourself to the earth. You become hard to move, hard to shake. The storms of life pass over you because you're rooted. He stood and extended his hand. Practice this every morning. Breathe before you think. Breathe before you plan. Breathe before you panic. Let your breath remind you you're still here, still alive, still whole. The seeker stood, feeling strangely heavier, but in a good way, like gravity had finally welcomed him home. Weeks passed, and the seeker began to notice the rhythm of his own resistance. Every time something changed, a project delayed, a relationship shifting, his body aging, he clenched. He fought the cold of winter, resented the heat of summer, mourned the falling leaves of autumn. He treated every transition like a betrayal. One gray morning, he found the ancient sage standing barefoot in the first snow of the season, completely still, as if he'd become part of the landscape itself. "Doesn't it bother you?" the seeker asked, shivering despite his heavy coat. "The cold, I mean the dying season." The sage turned slowly, snowflakes melting on his beard. "Why would it? Winter isn't an enemy. It's just winter. You suffer because you want summer in December. You want permanence in a world made of change." He stepped forward, his breath visible in the icy air. The true man accepts life as a gift without gratitude, and death as a return without resistance. He doesn't celebrate or mourn, he simply flows. The seeker felt something crack inside him. How much energy had he wasted fighting the seasons of his own life? The season of loss after his father died. The season of failure when his business collapsed. The season of loneliness. He'd resisted every single one, creating friction where there could have been flow. "But doesn't that make you passive? Cold?" The ancient sage smiled. "No, it makes me free. The tree doesn't weep when it loses its leaves. It trusts the cycle. Spring always returns, but only if you let winter do its work." They walked together through the snow-covered forest, and the seeker noticed something profound. The sage moved with the same ease in winter as he had in autumn. No complaint, no preference, just presence. "You see," the old man continued, "anxiety is born when you reject what is. You want this, but life gives you that. The war between your desire and reality creates all your suffering." He paused by a frozen stream. "Stop fighting the seasons, and you'll stop drowning in them." That night, for the first time in years, the restless sleeper didn't fight his exhaustion or fear his dreams. He lay down and whispered to himself, "This is the season I'm in, let it be." And something miraculous happened. His breath deepened, drawing up from his heels, and the night became silent. He didn't dream, he didn't thrash, he simply rested in the emptiness, trusting that morning would come without his effort. When he woke, there was no jolt, no panic, no scorecard, just the quiet presence of now. Months had passed since that first meeting in the forest, and the seeker, though he rarely thought of himself that way anymore, had become something quieter, something softer. He no longer woke up gasping. He no longer carried tomorrow's weight on today's shoulders. He'd learned to breathe from his heels, to accept the seasons, to sleep without dreams. But one question remained, hanging in the air like morning mist. What was he now, if not the anxious, striving man he'd always been? He found the ancient sage one final time, sitting on a riverbank, watching the water flow around stones without effort or complaint. "I don't understand," the seeker admitted, sitting beside him. "I've let go of so much ambition, control, fear, but I don't know what I've become. Am I still me?" The sage chuckled softly, the sound blending with the river's murmur. "You were never the things you clung to. You were always the space beneath them. Now you're just remembering." The old man picked up a handful of water and let it slip through his fingers. The true man is like this water. He takes the shape of whatever contains him, but he's never trapped by it. He flows around obstacles without resentment. He nourishes without demanding gratitude. He carves canyons over centuries without effort or force. This is integration with the Tao. Not becoming something new, but remembering what you've always been. Part of the current, not separate from it. The seeker, no, the man who'd stopped seeking, felt tears sting his eyes. Not sad tears, relieved ones. He'd spent decades trying to build a self that could withstand the world, when the secret was to become soft enough to move with it. Living without knowing exactly why, acting without calculating the result, the sage continued. This is the path of the true man. You don't need answers anymore. You just need to flow. And in that moment, sitting by the river as the sun broke through the clouds, he finally understood. He wasn't lost, he was home. So here's my question for you. Which season are you fighting right now? What part of your life are you resisting so hard that it's stealing your sleep and poisoning your mornings? Are you breathing from your throat, shallow and reactive, or have you started to remember what it feels like to be rooted? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear tonight. Maybe you are ready to stop being the restless sleeper. Maybe you are done with the scorecard, done with the war against the present moment, and ready to finally breathe from your heels. If you've forgotten what stillness feels like, know this: the path the seeker walked is open to you right now. It doesn't require a forest in Oregon. It only requires a shift in how you greet the dawn. Here's the truth. We're building something special on this channel, but we need your help to reach 1,000 subscribers. Every day we're sharing stories rooted in ancient wisdom, Taoist teachings, inner peace, and practical ways to let go of the anxiety that keeps you awake. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. We're here every single day with transformative content that cuts through the noise. Don't just watch and disappear. Be part of this journey. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their winter is not the end, who needs to remember they are not alone in this fight. Comment, like, subscribe. Let's grow this community together. Because the way of the true man isn't meant to be walked alone. It's meant to be shared, learned, and lived. See you in the next one.